Hello, friends. Thank you so much for joining us today for this important conversation. 3 areas where your business and religious freedoms are most vulnerable. We'll wait a minute or two while people join the webinar, so stand by and we'll be with you momentarily. Thank you for joining us, friends. We're just waiting for others to join the webinar, and then we will begin momentarily. Please stand by. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Shannon Royce with Christian Employers Alliance, and we're so happy to have you here for this discussion. 3 areas where your business and religious freedoms are most vulnerable. We're so pleased you took the time out of your day for this conversation, because we know that we're living in a pretty complex world at this point. In Matthew 10, Jesus tells us, "Behold, I am sending you out as sheep in the midst of wolves. So be wary as serpents and innocent as doves." Jesus knew we would live in a world fraught with threats, challenges, and conflicts, particularly in this presidential year. There is just so much noise. I find that I need to get up daily and be before God in my Bible and in prayer, just to maintain his perspective in this kind of season. We're blessed to live in a country with a constitution that protects our religious freedom. It specifically protects our religious expression. And we will often hear in the culture that we have freedom of worship, meaning freedom to worship privately in our homes or in our churches. But that's not what the Constitution says. The Constitution guarantees us free expression of religion, and that applies to our homes, families, our churches, our businesses, and our communities. We are free to express our religious faith across that entire spectrum. So we're pleased today to be joined by our friends at Innovest in co-hosting this webinar. We thank you for their support and are so pleased that their CEO will also join. Before I introduce our moderator, I just want to lead us in prayer as we enter this conversation. Father, we thank you for your goodness to us and for your presence in our lives. We thank you that Jesus did tell us that he is sending us out as sheep among wolves, so we should be wise as serpents and innocent as doves. And I pray that even as we enter this conversation, that you will lead our speakers to share what needs to be heard, that we will all learn what we need to do to walk in these days with wisdom and discretion as we live out our faith in our communities. And thank you for this time in Jesus' name. Amen. So let me introduce our moderator today, my friend and former colleague, Paul Fitzpatrick, who's the president of the 1792 Exchange, an organization protecting conservative and faith-based institutions and philanthropy. I'm sorry, Paul, I have trouble with that word, while helping corporations move back toward neutral to protect free exercise, free speech, and free enterprise. Previously, he served in Washington, D.C. as Deputy Chief of Staff for U.S. Senator Kelly Loeffler of Georgia and as Chief of Staff to Congressman Mark Meadows of North Carolina. Prior to that, he was in senior leadership at Family Research Council after starting his career with the Xerox Corporation. For more information, you can find Paul on LinkedIn at Paul Fitzpatrick 3. We will take questions at the end of this discussion, so if you'll please add your questions to the chat, we will get to as many of those as we can. Turning it over to you, Paul.
Shannon, thank you so much, and thanks everybody for joining. It's my honor to be with you all and to be with these three distinguished panelists. Let me quickly introduce them. Ericka McPherson is the Executive Director of Covenant Choice, which is a leading provider of captive insurance solutions and Christ-honoring healthcare benefits. She's an attorney and brings a comprehensive understanding of various areas of insurance and law. That includes employment law, corporate governance, compliance, healthcare, public policy, advocacy, legislative relations, and executive leadership. So she's the right person for this call. Next, we've got Rich Todd. Rich, the CEO and co-founder of Innovest Portfolio Solutions. Rich has nearly 40 years of experience in investment consulting, and currently provides consulting services to institutions, including many faith-based organizations. That includes ministries, universities, churches, dioceses, and religious orders. Innovest advises on assets of over $45 billion and has 60 employees. He's a frequent author on fiduciary and investment-related matters and has been on a board member of many organizations. And Rich and his wife reside in Colorado. They've been married 39 years, which is fantastic. And they have two children, one of whom is a professional baseball player. All right, next, last but not least, we have Doug Schneider. Doug's executive partner and chief partnership officer for AmFil, which serves roughly 200 nonprofit clients with services including strategic planning, fundraising, and talent management and recruitment. Doug has over 2 decades of experience in fundraising, strategic planning, marketing, communications, and business development. He speaks on a variety of development-related topics all around the country. I bump into him a lot. He serves as alma mater, Messiah University, and on several local boards and nonprofits in Delaware, where he resides with his wife and 4 children. And he let us know that his happy place is hiking in the woods, and he loves Maine, but for some reason lives in Delaware. So we can help him at the end of the call on that. Let me just very briefly talk about why we're here. All of us on the call would rather be doing something else that would be more productive than having to spend time to protect religious freedom in the workplace. So really, how did we get here? So let's just talk very briefly about that. Why are we here? In essence, the left has captured all the institutions, and just corporations were the last. And they've been politicized and weaponized, and they're harming small businesses and denying our freedoms, and they're harming nonprofits. So let's very quickly talk about how we got here. The UN birthed this concept of ESG, environmental, social, and governance principles, to help leverage assets, your and my assets, to advance their agenda. And nonprofit organizations, activists, shareholders, and governments jumped right in, and we're thrilled. As this was growing, what happened? There were some financial products that were investment-based, ESG, investment-based products. But what happened historically? Financial crisis happened. After that, who hated corporations? Everybody, left, right, Republican, Democrat. They're all hated. They had pressure from everybody, including the government. And there's also pressure on Wall Street because of lower fees. They've moved to index funds. We all love those. Love the low fees in our 401ks. But that was massive pressure. And the big asset managers, BlackRock, State Street, and Vanguard, and the big proxy advisors, ISS and Glass Lewis, who have tremendous leverage, they got pressure from their biggest customers. Who are their biggest customers? Big pension funds and governments. And when I say big state pension funds, blue state pension funds are pressuring them to get more aggressive on these ESG principles, environmental, social, and governance principles. We'll talk about it. And so what did Wall Street do? They just said, okay, we'll jump on the bandwagon. We can make a whole lot more money charging maybe 4 or 5 times the fees on these ESG funds. But they also decided to start voting the proxies. So in my retirement fund, Larry Fink is voting the shares. Historically, in these passive funds, they did not vote them. And so they started doing that. Not only were they pushing these liberal ESG focused shareholder resolutions, they were also engaging with CEOs saying, you need to push these principles, these on the environmentals and social and governance principles. Yes, these are radical left principles, but you got to push them. Use your corporate brand and your resources influencing your employees and through your messaging and your marketing to advance these agendas. And so really, Wall Street was able to get the government off their backs, the left off their backs. And obviously their regulators were happy. And so what happened again? Next, Business Roundtable redefined the purpose of a corporation in 2019. This is the explosion of stakeholder capitalism. Then in 2020, what happened? We all saw cancellations, divestments, debanking, loss of service if you were on the wrong side of the Trump campaign or COVID or BLM or abortion or religious liberty issues. And, we saw cake bakers and florists and web designers and ministries and political organizations and adoption care organizations and small businesses denied service for political, religious, or ideological reasons. And so bottom line is small businesses are being bullied by large corporations who are often their customers. And these agendas, we can spend all day on the climate agenda, the racial agenda is pushed on you through DEI, the gender agenda through Human Rights Campaign, and obviously the trans issue, which Ericka might get through forcing you to pay for benefits to trans, not only your employees, but their children. Abortion agenda, you got to provide benefits and subsidize abortion. That's what the big companies are doing. They want you to do it as well. Thankfully, there's been a huge pushback from state treasurers, attorneys general, legislators. And in essence, the ESG cabal is weakening, but these corporations have embraced these agendas. And so the threat to small businesses continues. And so thankfully, we've got these 3 experts in these 3 industry areas who can talk to us about what's going on. And so with that, I'm going to pivot over to asking questions of our panelists. And at the end, as Shannon said, we have time for folks on the call here to submit their questions and submit them throughout, please. And then Shannon will field them and I'll field them and we'll get them to our speakers. So let me just dive right in. And let's start with Rich. Rich, it seems that employers are being forced to use vendors that are completely misaligned from a Christian values perspective. Is that the case in the money management arena where you work?
Thank you, Paul. Your comments have led right into my comments as well. I don't know necessarily if religious organizations, faith-based organizations are being forced to use some of these vendors, but they are. Let me put this into perspective. At Innovest, we're an investment management consulting firm. Our role is to perform due diligence on products, managers, and strategies. So in the normal course of business, we judge these managers to understand whether or not they're good at managing money. Is their track record repeatable? Secondly, are they good at managing a Christian values portfolio or a biblically conscious portfolio? But the third element is whether or not their values as a money management organization are aligned or even misaligned with those that they're managing money for. So we ask a series of questions that are values oriented. The first question that we ask is about religious freedom in the workplace. And Paul, you know this, that especially with Wall Street firms, They have very little tolerance for religious freedom. A friend of mine is an executive at a Wall Street firm. He's president of a division of a Wall Street firm, and human resources told him that he had to take his crucifix off the wall. A pride flag is okay, but that crucifix had to come down. We ask questions about benefits. Does your organization pay for abortions? Does your organization pay for abortion travel? We ask about philanthropy. Does your organization give philanthropy dollars to organizations that are antithetical to the church? We ask for a list of those organizations. And let me give you an example of some of the answers that we hear. There's a firm out there that manages, we believe, more money than any other firm in the country for religious organizations. We were recently referred a foundation from a religious organization. It was over 100 million, and half of that money, 50 million, was managed by this firm. The three organizations at the top of the list for them were all organizations that were antithetical to the church, and you can imagine who they were. We asked the question, you're managing a lot of money for the church. Why are you doing so? Clearly your values are not aligned. And they told us that the reason they like managing money for the church is because they believe that Christians are backwards, and they believe that they can influence them. We also ask about sponsorships and marketing. Where do these money management organizations, where are they spending their marketing dollars? And many firms have raced to the ESG left, and they're sponsoring organizations, especially in the LBGT world, that are misaligned with the church. And they're also managing money for many faith-based organizations. And they're doing so in a perhaps a religious line. The firm that manages the most money in the faith-based world, from a consultant's point of view, is very active in that world as well. So the bottom line is there are many conflicts, many values conflicts with firms that manage money for the church. Very few investment firms are asking these questions. And I think that one of the reasons that they're not is because their own values in many cases are misaligned as well.
Wow, Rich, I mean, we could stop right there and all just go and talk to our different organizations and say, switch your asset managers, ask these good questions. So thank you. What you did mention insurance and benefits. So on that, let me jump over to Ericka. Ericka, how do captive insurance models like Covenant Choice address the unique needs and values of faith-based self-insurers, especially considering these religious freedom exemptions and federal law that we talk about? And what advantages does it offer over, in essence, traditional health insurance models? I think a lot of folks on the call may not know.
Yeah, so thank you, Paul. And to kind of piggyback on what Rich is saying, Covenant Choice provides the opportunity for private businesses who are in the Christian space who, they are utilizing their private dollars to fund their healthcare programs to ensure that they are honoring all of their religious freedoms. And if you think about it, most companies' largest spend within their budget is going to be for healthcare benefits for their employees. And a lot of times I think that businesses don't really even think about what at the end of the day those private held dollars are going towards whenever they pay their healthcare premium. So Covenant Choice gives these private employers who want to honor their religious beliefs to join others who share in their beliefs. And our members actually create their own self-funded healthcare plan to which they can make various carve-outs like the transgender issue, the abortifacients issue, and they are able to control their healthcare plan from the start where it is with the actual employer and then up to Covenant Choice. We're actually the stop loss piece to where we are able to ensure that in the event of a catastrophic loss, there's another layer of protection there. And then in that layer of protection, we have other entities, other organizations that have deeply held religious beliefs that want to share in that risk spread for those catastrophic losses. And so what happens is we are able to join forces with other like-minded organizations who don't want to pay for these things that, you know, are so hot on the table right now. As you're hearing, and like you discussed in your opening, Paul, right now the left is pushing for mandates in various states to pay for things like transgender care for minors even. And it's from a religious standpoint, nobody should have to be paid, whether it be through, you know, their benefit plan, their healthcare plan, or their retirement plan. Nobody should have to be forced, mandated to provide these benefits. So with that, I would just encourage everybody who's on the call to really think about what goes into a healthcare premium when you're paying for it at the end of the day. Because when underwriting looks at those things, the costs of all those mandated items that are being thrown in when you're not self-funded get spread amongst everybody in a particular insurance pool. So at the end of the day, a lot of companies, they may not even realize that they are actually paying money towards things that they may not believe in.
Wow, that's so shocking, but that's the reality. So thank you, Ericka. Let's shift to Doug. I mean, we've got nonprofits on the call. We all support and love our nonprofits and need them, and that's your space, is helping them to be effective. In essence, have you ever turned away a potential client or partner because you didn't think they were a good fit, or have clients turned you down because of what AmFIL stands for?
Well, thank you, Paul. And it's great to be with everyone today. The answer to that is yes and yes. We at AmFIL, our mission is to strengthen civil society by helping mission-driven enterprises flourish. And when we say mission-driven, I'll let you all in on a secret here. What we really mean is mission-aligned. So yes, because every organization presumably has a mission, right? But it may not be aligned with our mission. So we're very clear about that, and it's something that we make sure is disseminated throughout the firm and owned and absorbed by our colleagues. But it's really important to us that we do work with mission-aligned organizations. It's important to who we are as a firm. And so there's been a couple instances over the years, we've been around since 2009, where we have made deliberate, distinct choices not to work with potential clients. One example that comes to mind is, this was several years ago now, it was pre-pandemic, but we got a referral. I can't remember where the referral came from. I think it was an existing client actually that had made a recommendation that this other nonprofit look to us and work with us. And so I fielded a call, I did a discovery call. And I can't remember the organization's name, and I probably wouldn't mention it anyway, but it was an organization that was doing work kind of in the voter empowerment space, trying to get voter registrations. And on the surface, it looked fine, right? Like it looked fine that, getting increasing voter registrations, getting people involved in our democracy, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I had a good call, but there was something there. I just couldn't put my finger on it exactly. And as I did some digging and took a look, at the end of the day, we started to realize that actually, at least in some of their work, they were, some of their efforts were anti-religious freedom. Mm-hmm. And, kind of pause for a second. It's like, okay, this was going to be a strategic planning engagement, a potentially sizable engagement. Had a brief conversation with my partners. At the end of the day, we realized in good conscience, we could not work with them. Their at least this aspect of their work was antithetical to what we believe as a firm. And importantly, it was against what the clients with whom we're working, we're supporting their missions and helping them. And so we didn't want to be, basically doing one thing with the left hand and another thing with the right hand, which is actually really counter. So one is just we didn't believe in what they were doing. And so at the end of the day, we just turned down the business opportunity. But I think it would have also been problematic from a business standpoint, practical standpoint, to be working with a client like that, which had been counter to the mission of our current clients. And so we're very cognizant of that. So we're willing to you know, part ways very early. And interestingly enough, I was very candid about why we weren't going to pursue the opportunity with them. And to their credit, they understood. I wasn't sure how that conversation was going to go, but they said, fair enough, we understand. And we parted ways. So we didn't pursue that. More recently, we have a partnership with a grant making foundation that uses our firm to help their nonprofits. So they have been giving capacity building grants to various nonprofits. It kind of has a regional focus of all sorts. These aren't necessarily, you know, politically oriented or you know, they're just, many of these organizations are local groups doing good work in their community. And a grant was going to be given to a particular nonprofit. And it was interesting. It wasn't the leadership at this nonprofit, but a little bit lower level, some of the people that were going to be kind of engaging the day-to-day work with us potentially to hire us through this grant from this foundation started digging around. And, you know, they started looking at our client list. And they're like, oh, well, we see you work with so-and-so, and the Southern Poverty Law Center has deemed that a hate group. And that group, you know, is against LGBTQ and is, you know, against abortion and all these things. And we're like, we don't know if we can work with you. And I'm glad the person actually called, because at the end of the day, we said, well, you know, that's fine. And we actually don't know if we want to work with you at the same time. So it was interesting that they, you know, they did their due diligence. They figured out who we were, and they figured out who some of our clients were. And, you know, that was a problem for them. And as far as we're concerned, I'd rather have that conversation early and to know that it's not going to be a good partnership moving forward. And I think in part, any organization, any, you know, whether you're a nonprofit or a for-profit, you have to have an abundance mentality. I think if you're thinking like, I have to get this business, I have to partner with this group, I have to get this one client, I actually think that's detrimental to just long-term growth. And I also think in the marketplace, if you make those decisions and are discerning, right? And I think it can actually be an advantage to make you more distinctive and distinguish yourselves for future business. So yeah, we are perfectly happy to say no to clients. And you know, if they decide that we're not the right fit for them, we'd rather know that on the front end, and that's not a problem.
Yeah, no, that's great. I mean, it's about alignment and knowing you. I'm sure you prayed through that as well. Rich, let's talk switching gears to alignment. Alignment on, you know, you're about returns and can portfolios or retirement plan menus be constructed with Christian values in mind? And should we, if you do that, should we expect basically a give up in performance?
Good question, Paul. You know what? 5 years ago, we would have said the answer was yes, that, you know, you should expect a slight give up. And the question for a church or a ministry or diocese is it worth selling your soul for a quarter of a point or a half a point? But we no longer think that that's the case. We believe that you can build a values conscious, a Christian, biblically conscious portfolio and not suffer from a return perspective. There are products and managers out there that have evolved over time that are of good quality today because of technology and a retirement plan. You can take best of breed. You can take the best products from different fund families, some Christian fund families or Catholic fund families, and construct a portfolio with separately accountable options. And even on the portfolio side, you can use alternative investments that work very well in a Christian portfolio. We use timberland and farmland and private debt and private equity, and there's some really good Christian managers out there in these spaces that help elevate returns or reduce risk in portfolios. The one thing that you said, Paul, that I think should resonate with people was your comments about proxy voting. And there are many employers, many trustees of nonprofit organizations that are kind of oblivious to the proxy vote. And you mentioned a few firms that are dominant in the proxy voting world. And even one of those proxy voting managers within their own Christian guidelines have no opinion as to transgenderism. They have no opinion as to the difference between a biological woman and a transgender woman. And when they think about diversity, they consider only race and gender identity in that diversification. So it is something that all investors, whether you're a trustee of an organization or a plan sponsor, or just a personal investor, you need to understand the impact that proxy voting has on the makeup of public companies.
That's such a great point, Rich. And I would add for everybody, your point is their perspective of Christian is probably different. It is different than everybody on this call. And everybody on this call, we don't agree on every single issue. But the point is, if you're going, we even just saw BlackRock announce in the last couple of days, they're going to give people greater ability to vote their proxies, their customers. But you need to dig down deeper to find out, what do they mean? What are their definitions? What are the actual guidelines? And so, little side note there. Let's jump back to Doug. When we think about donors, and do you think the donors care which partners any Christian organization uses and which vendors, or do they care really more about results and impact and more about culture fit?
I would say yes, absolutely. Christian donors, philanthropists care about the partners and the organizations and who you associate with. Just like any good parent, you're going to care about your children, who they associate with at the end of the day. But I don't think it's an either or proposition. I think you asked the question about a cultural fit versus results of some sort, whatever you're measuring and taking a look at. I think oftentimes there's a false premise that you have to choose one over the other. And I think Rich was talking about just in the investment marketplace, there are plenty of options. You don't have to give up a rate of return, right, to be culturally aligned, missionally aligned, values aligned. I think the same thing goes for if you're a nonprofit and you're looking to work with a particular vendor. There are plenty of vendors, consultants, contractors, et cetera, that can share your values, or at least at a minimum are agnostic, right? They're not antithetical. They're not going to be working actively against your values and what you stand for, elsewhere. And I actually think for Christian donors in particular, the concept and the idea of stewardship is a biblical one, right? We're stewards of God's resources. I mean, everything that's given to us, we should be stewards of. And that mindset is likely much more prevalent among Christian donors. And so I think that's important. You should think, if you are receiving funds from a donor of any sort, whether it's a $10 donor or $1 million donor, you're a steward of those funds. And how are you spending those funds, right? And I think one of my colleagues has used this analogy is a better way to say it, which I think is somewhat apt. He's like, okay, if you go hire a contractor, right, to work on a project in your house, maybe redo your kitchen or whatever it is, and say you have two competent skilled professionals coming in to do the work, and one's a little bit cheaper, right? Maybe you can save 10% on this one, but the trustworthy factor is not there, right? Like, you may not want to leave your wife and kids home with that contractor for one reason or another, but you have the other contractor who's also competent, but maybe 10% more. Who are you going to go with, right? Like, our values should guide the decisions that we make. And let me just say one or two other things here real quickly on this point. We are currently having conversations, our firm, with some high net worth, well-known, faith-based philanthropists, Christian donors, who are actively talking with our firm, because what's happening is they're seeing, and we're early in conversations about some ideas and ways we might be able to work together. But what's happening is there are organizations whom they're supporting and they care deeply about, and they're concerned because some of the vendors and the consultants that the nonprofits are working with, they know for a fact they're also working for Planned Parenthood. So they're coming in to do capital campaign work, and I'm sure they're doing a great job, by the way. I'm sure they're delivering. But they also know that they're paying these folks and then they're going off and helping Planned Parenthood. Like that's problematic, right? If you have Christian values and operate on a set of principles. So one last thing real quickly, I'll just mention on this and we'll move on. But the other thing is you have to think about if you're working with certain vendors, and depending on the relationship, if say you're bringing somebody to work on your CRM, right, or your database, you sign NDAs and you have the contracts in place, but you don't know always who's coming in to kind of look under the hood, right? I think you're potentially, and I don't want to like overstate this, but you're potentially opening yourself up to risk when you're bringing in non-aligned folks, or certainly folks who are hostile, because you don't know who the mid or lower level person who's going to have access, right? Not that you're hiding anything, or not that there's anything that shouldn't be known in the public, but you're giving access potentially to people who are misaligned. And I don't think that generally is a good thing. And then you have the risk of being canceled, which is a whole nother topic of conversation, especially in the tech space. But anyway,
No, that's really good points, Doug. Ericka, let's get back to you. In what ways does the structure of captive insurance this empower faith-based self-insurers to proactively manage risks, promote financial stewardship, and really enhance the sustainability of, that's the whole point of your healthcare coverage programs, at the same time as staying true to your faith and your religious mission under the principles of ERISA? There's a lot there.
Yeah, absolutely. So to follow up on what Doug was saying, when your decisions are driven by your values, that's what makes the captive solution so nice and seamless, to be able to protect your religious freedoms. Because when you are building your own healthcare plan under federal law, you have the right to make those particular carve-outs. And then from there, you're able to drive your decisions and your values all the way up to your reinsurers. And that would include, your stop loss carriers that help whenever there's catastrophic claims. They can come in and support these organizations whenever they need it the most, right? So our organization allows like-minded organizations to not only help structure their healthcare plans the way that protects their values, but we also help guide those decisions as far as, again, these are the things that we believe should not be covered in your healthcare plan at the end of the day, to make sure that your values are aligning with Christian principles. And then on top of that, we do have vendors that we work with that also help, whether it be a third-party administrator of the healthcare plan or your broker, for instance. A lot of organizations rely on their healthcare broker to make sure that, they're buying healthcare programs that really suit what their clients are looking for. So we want to make sure that we are working with brokers who understand where our members are aligned when it comes to their faith-based decisions in their healthcare plans. We're open to working with any broker as long as they're open to understanding where our mission and our allegiance is going to be as far as what our values hold. And so that's very important to make sure that when you're building your healthcare plan, you're in the driver's seat. You're the one that makes the decisions on what you're going to cover, what you're not going to cover, who you're going to contract with to help administer your healthcare program, who you're going to contract with to help build your healthcare program, et cetera. So, decisions driving values, I think is key, especially in the healthcare space. And when you're able to make your own decisions, you're able to sit through and really be transparent. Once those numbers start coming in, you can fully see what you're paying for, how you're paying for it, why you're paying for it, versus when you're in a fully insured program, you just pay your premium and whatever is covered under that bigger healthcare plan is going to be covered, and you have no control over those costs. And then what happens is at the end of a plan year, you get your premium bill and you have no control over that. Whereas in a self-funded model, you're able to control a little bit more so as far as what your costs are on the front side, in hopes that you're able to protect those costs from being too high on the back side, which at the end of the day, hopefully you'll see some cost savings, as well as making sure that your values are going to be protected.
Excuse me. Oh, that's great. It's a hugely important issue for every small business and nonprofit. Let me jump back to Doug. Doug, we've covered a lot of different issues today, but really, what's the most valuable thing you've found for AmFIL and what you've done to protect AmFIL in this increasingly hostile environment towards Christians and people of faith?
It's an important question. It's actually one we give a lot of thought to at our firm. I mean, in part because of the growth that we've had. When you're a small firm and a handful of people, maybe 10, 15, 20 folks, the culture of the firm is easier than when you have 100, or that's where we're at right now. But certainly if you have hundreds and thousands of employees. But it sounds cliche, but we do hire for culture. And we spend a lot of time just making sure that the people that we have at our firm share our values. They know who we are and the clients with whom we work. And so we take time to get to know them. And I realize I'm not an HR expert, so go to other folks for what you can and can't do in the hiring process of the specific questions. But we want to know their character. We want to know. We ask questions. We will say, would you feel comfortable working with such and such type of client? Right. We want to see how they respond. We want to know what they're reading. We want to know who's influenced them. These are kind of like sub questions, right, to competence and experience. But we're very clear on who we are. If you take a look at the values that we have as a firm, we talk about things like honoring tradition, right? Like Western civilization, Judeo-Christianity, the principles and values associated with that. We are just explicitly clear on the culture of the firm, the values and principles, and also we want our potential colleagues to know the clients with whom we work. Because ultimately they're going to be serving our clients. And we want them to be not just ho-hum about their missions. We want them to be absolutely excited about the work that our clients are doing and fully bought in. And so, it's not necessarily easy. And I think any organization that's growing, there's challenges, but I think you start at home, I guess, as it were. And I think that's one of the best ways to kind of safeguard and just to make sure that there's alignment across the firm. So are we perfect at it? Probably not, but that's I think one of the best ways to protect, not only our firm, but also our clients at the end of the day.
Absolutely. That makes perfect sense. Great philosophy. Ericka, you may have folks on the call, and there may be folks on the call who are interested. If an employer would like to participate in a faith-based healthcare plan, really, what are the steps they can take to make the conversion?
Yeah, so if currently right now you are interested in thinking about making a change, I would first encourage a business to really look at what are they doing right now when it comes to healthcare coverage. Are you in what's called a fully insured plan, meaning that you go to possibly one of the larger insurance carriers, name one that may come to the top of your mind, and are you just paying them a premium and every year you get your 15-20% increase, and you really don't understand why is that increasing and how can I control those costs? And then, but the biggest question that I think I would encourage you to ask is what is included in those costs, right? And so from there, once you are looking at what are you actually paying for right now, in that fully insured model, if you feel like it is some things that you would like to explore a little bit more, I would encourage you to consider, am I big enough to be able to self-fund the healthcare plan up to a certain point to which I know that I can control my loss. And if that's a point to where you feel like you can comfortably manage, I think that that's the point to where I think the conversation really makes sense to see, okay, well, if I have the ability to potentially fund the front part of my healthcare costs for my employees and my business and exclude these things that are against my religious beliefs, then the next step would be to work with a group like Covenant Choice. We can help connect you with vendors, again, that share our mission and goals, and we can help create a healthcare plan document that is legal and has stood the test of legal challenges under federal law to do those exclusions. And then we can look at what the options would be from a cost standpoint on making sure that your losses are protected at certain points to which you're financially comfortable with.
Wow. Okay. That's fantastic. So you're the right person to have on the call. Rich, let's go back to you. And this is the last question, and then we'll go to questions from the audience. So folks, please submit email or by chat, and Shannon will walk us through there after Rich answers this question. Rich, in the investment industry, as we talk, we see a lot of the push to do good, and that's a good thing. However, there's a lot of it has been a focus on ESG. We've talked a little bit about that. Can you get into that a little bit more? Are these ESG strategies, are any of them a Christian approach to building a biblically aligned portfolio that you talked about?
Thanks. I would say by and large, they're not Christian. There are a couple products out there that actually screen out abortion, but some of those that used to screen out abortion no longer do. For instance, PIMCO, less than a year ago, made a decision that they would no longer screen out abortion in their social or ESG product. So in most cases, ESG and a Christian portfolio they're completely different. I gave a talk just a couple of weeks ago. The talk was is ESG Catholic? It was to a Catholic. It was at a Catholic conference. The one thing that I think is missing in the S in ESG is human dignity, and often the E, which is the environment, is trumps earth over human dignity.
Mm-hmm.
And if you look at, for instance, the Congo, where most of the lithium is mined, that is in every cell phone, every lithium battery, every electric car, it's estimated that about 70% of that it has either child or slave labor touching it, and those people are desperately poor, and they're being taken advantage of by many that are driving this green agenda. And I think for Christians, we just have to think about human dignity in the decision making that we're forced to make in managing portfolios or using any vendors in our work or in our business.
Absolutely. That's powerful. Thank you, Rich. Now we're going to switch gears, and Shannon's going to come back on, and she will help us walk through some of the questions that may have been emailed or in the chat. So let me hand it off to you, Shannon.
Thank you so much, Paul. Actually, to follow up on what Rich was just commenting on ESG, one of the questions that came in, and it wasn't directed to anyone, so we'll let whoever wants to respond to this. Where do these ESG companies tend to stand on Israel in general and the current war specifically?
I can jump in, Shannon.
Sure.
A couple of things. You've seen Unilever, their subsidiary Ben & Jerry's boycotting Israel. You have seen, interestingly, what folks don't realize is when it comes to BLM, after George Floyd and all that, really major politicization of corporations. Claremont Institute did research, and they have a database. You can go to their site. They've identified pledges, not all fulfilled, but pledges from big corporations to Black Lives Matter or their affiliated organizations, which often have a better sounding name, but they're doing a lot of the same, in essence, racially divisive work. That the pledges from corporations was $100 billion with a B, not an M. Not everybody fulfilled, but that's one. And interestingly, what we saw after October 7 in Israel, one of the BLM chapters praised Hamas and had the image of the paraglider coming down. And the Coalition for Jewish Values did a whole 3 or 4 videos pointing this out, that you have corporations funding BLM, which is supporting Hamas. Now, yes, there's a couple of steps between those two, and the corporations weren't openly on the front end supporting Hamas or anti-Semitic efforts. But when this is a perfect example, when stakeholder capitalism takes over a company and they get involved in issues that are divisive, they lose control of the narrative, lose control of the money. And I guarantee none of them thought it was anti-Semitic supporting BLM.
Sure.
I believe in their motives on that. But ultimately, BLM has a lot of anti-Semitic statements and thoughts to their founders, et cetera. So it's just an example. So the questioner has a really good question. So we're trying to find out, though, I will say, is there anti-Semitism within corporations? And we're digging into that ourselves.
That's really helpful, Paul. Thank you so much. This next question sort of builds on that as well. Just looking at the volume of money controlled by left-aligned investment firms and other corporations, is there even enough Christian money out there where the departure of those funds would even be noticed? That might be best for you, Rich.
Yes. Thank you, Shannon. I don't remember the number, but there is a number out there in Christian money, and it is large. It is. There's no question that if we join forces, that we would have an impact. I think some of it is just lack of knowledge. It is really surprising to me, even within, let's say, the donor advice fund world, how some of the vendors that they're using are they're misaligned, or they're not really paying attention to proxy voting. I think what Paul is doing at 1792 Exchange is bringing much of this to light. There's some others out there doing the same thing, but there is no question that we can have a big impact if we understood the issues, and if we really focused on values alignment in almost the same way that the left has in their cause.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I know Paul can speak to this. The state financial officers weighed in very heavily on these issues and had a huge impact on pulling money out of BlackRock and State Street. State Street. Thank you. I don't remember the numbers on that, Paul. Do you recall the numbers on that?
Well, the public number, the number I'm aware of is about $9 billion from about 8 states pulled out of BlackRock and growing. I know Oklahoma right now is trying to pull $7 billion themselves out. So there's going to be more because states have passed laws making that easier.
Yeah, that's terrific.
If I may, I'll just make a quick comment from the philanthropic nonprofit side. I've heard numbers like the left, kind of like the progressive left outspends those on the right or have a more traditional conservative viewpoint, religious viewpoint, like 10 to 1. Mm-hmm. I think, though, that may be overstated in as much as I think for the left, everything is political. Like politics is their life. And I think for those who come from a religious background, faith-based Christian community, life is often more than that. Right. And so even the philanthropy, there are significant resources out there. I think the left is better coordinated in many ways. And so there's an appearance that it's a behemoth, and it is large, and it can be overpowering at times. But at least from a nonprofit perspective, like standing out and being courageous in your mission and your values, there is more than enough funds available in the philanthropic marketplace to fund the missions and the good work. I think, though, it's has to do sometimes the perception of politics versus other activities and other areas of life in which we live. And so it's a bit of, it's not really comparing apples to apples necessarily.
Right, right. Thank you for jumping in on that, Doug. A question for Ericka. How big does a company have to be to consider becoming a self-funded plan?
Yeah, that's a great question. So currently, right now, Covenant Choice is able to offer self-funded coverage to employers that are 25 or more employees, as long as 65% participate of their employee population. So that's the smallest right now, but I can tell you that I've been working with CEA on potentially expanding our offerings. So stay tuned for that. But currently right now, really 25 and up is going to be your best case scenario if you would like to go self-funded.
Terrific. So one final question before we close out our webinar today. There are so many good questions in the chat. Pardon me. Question: what are your thoughts on conservative funds like Strive?
So I think that's probably for me. I think there are many products that are being created by those with conservative values or Christian values, and that's great. I think for any new product, you have to wait for some seasoning. I think it's a great idea. I think what they're doing is great. We just need to judge their performance over time. But I think it's exciting that many of these types of investment products and strategies are being created. My colleague did send me the number on the assets that are managed by Catholic or Christian organizations, Catholics and Christians. It's about 30 trillion. So that's a big number. Unfortunately, just a small fraction of that is actually managed in a biblically conscious or Christian values portfolio.
Right.
Most are just managed in a secular way.
Right.
So that tells you the impact that we can have for sure.
If all of those funds were united, it would be phenomenal, the impact it could have.
Yes.
Right. Well, guys, this has been really a thought-provoking discussion. And Paul, do you want to close us out with any closing remarks from our guests?
Yeah, why don't if we just have a couple of minutes here, and if we can just do a lightning round from each of our
Sure.
participants, give us 30 to 60 seconds, a final charge or encouragement or action item. Just go for it. We'll go, Rich, you go first.
I think stand up for your values. The other side has been standing up for their values for a long time, and we've been hurt by it. So I'm not saying that we should create a cancel culture, but I think we need to understand how important our values are, and we should be using really high quality firms that are values aligned.
Thank you, Rich. Ericka, go ahead.
So I would just encourage everybody on the call today to, again, just take a time and look through, what is it exactly that is within your healthcare plan and your organization, your business? What is included in what you are providing to your employees? And in the flip side of that, if you are just in a fully insured program and you're just paying your premium, I would again encourage you to sit down and look at that plan document to see what they are covering, what they're not covering, and really just evaluate what is it at the end of the day that I am paying for that may or may not go against my religious beliefs. And if those things are included, just know that you're not stuck, that there's ways that we can assist, or other companies, that are in the space that can assist. So please reach out. I'm happy to work with anybody, and I appreciate everybody's time today.
Thanks, Ericka. Great. Go ahead, 30 to 60.
All right. Well, since we work in the nonprofit space sector primarily, I'd say, for those that are raising money and receiving donations and funds, remember that you're a steward of those funds. I think you're a steward of those resources. I think having that mindset will help you in the decision making. process. And I'd also say courage is contagious. It's
Yeah.
a rare commodity in today's society,
Yes.
but it attracts others. So I think when you are discerning and you make courageous decisions and whom you partner with, who you work with, I think you can actually parlay that and leverage that to your advantage. I actually think it can be compelling for donors. So that can be an asset for you, not just because it's the right decision to make, but also it can be appealing and attractive. And if you're in the nonprofit sector, help you raise funds as well.
Absolutely.
Great. Thanks, Doug. Shannon, go ahead, close us out.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for joining us today. To our participants, your contributions have been significant. You've given us a lot to think about. Thank you to all of those who joined us today as our guests. We're grateful for your time and appreciate your participation with us. God bless you, and we'll close out our webinar now. Have a good day.